You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin. I came home earlier than usual that day. I was supposed to be in back-to-back meetings until evening, but somehow everything had wrapped up early. I didn't think much of it at first, just happy to get a few hours to myself before dinner. As I stepped into the house, the silence felt a little off. I set my bag down by the door and kicked off my shoes. The house seemed quieter than usual, the kind of quiet where you know something's out of place, but you're not sure what yet. I called out, "Kelsey?" No answer. I walked through the living room, glancing around like I normally do after a long day. The couch was empty. The TV was off. She was usually on the couch by this time, watching one of those ridiculous true crime documentaries she loved, the ones that kept me up at night with their dark themes. But not today. That's when I noticed the coffee cup on the kitchen counter. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't hers. It was a to-go cup, the kind from that fancy coffee shop downtown, the one we'd been to together a couple of times when we felt like splurging. What struck me first wasn't the cup, though. It was the lipstick. It was smudged on the lid, a deep red color. I stared at it for a few moments, my mind working a little too fast, putting things together in ways that didn't make sense. Kelsey didn't wear that shade. It was too bold for her, and I knew she had never liked anything too dramatic. I almost told myself it was nothing, just a mistake, a mix-up. She probably grabbed the wrong cup on her way out. Maybe it was a friend's or someone else's. But then I saw it. A tiny scrap of paper tucked under the cup, just enough to make me pause. It was a receipt. I picked it up. It was from the same coffee shop, stamped with a time and date. It was recent, about an hour ago. The exact time I was wrapping up at the office. I felt my stomach drop a little. I shook my head. It was stupid, right? All this could mean nothing. Still, I tucked the receipt into my pocket. "Kels?" I called again, a little louder this time, stepping into the hallway toward our bedroom. She appeared in the doorway a few seconds later, hair loose, wearing that old sweater she always put on when she wanted to look cozy. "Oh, hey, you're home early," she said, trying to smile, but not quite making it look natural. "Yeah, wrapped up early." I studied her face for a second. "How was your day?" "Good," she replied quickly, walking past me toward the kitchen. "Busy, you know, just the usual." I nodded, my eyes drifting toward the coffee cup again. "Who's the coffee for?" She froze for just a second, her hand hovering near the counter. "Oh, it was a mix-up. You know how they sometimes make a mistake and hand out someone else's order?" I raised an eyebrow. She had never been one to play it off so quickly before. "A mix-up, huh?" She turned around, her face brightening a little. "Yeah, I grabbed the wrong one. It's no big deal." "No big deal, huh?" I asked, my voice coming out a little sharper than I intended. I didn't mean to make it sound suspicious, but I felt the words hanging there. She forced a smile. "You know, just one of those things. Nothing to worry about." I wanted to ask more, but I didn't. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something in the air felt off. I wasn't sure if it was just me or if there was something I wasn't being told. I wanted to believe her. I did believe her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. So instead of pressing her on it, I just nodded. "All right, well, I'm going to take a shower," I said. She gave me a nod and went to the fridge to grab something, but my mind kept going back to the lipstick, to the receipt, to her sudden defensiveness. There was something I was missing, but I wasn't sure what. Not yet. Over the next few weeks, the small cracks I had noticed in Kelsey's behavior began to widen. It wasn't just the lipstick on the coffee cup anymore. It was the subtle shifts in her daily routines, the little things that didn't add up. One of the first things I noticed was how guarded she had become on the phone. At first, I chalked it up to her being busy with work, or just needing a little more space. But then it became a pattern. She would always smile when I walked into the room and quickly end her call, leaving me with a polite, "I'll call you back later." At first, I didn't think much of it, but the more it happened, the more it started to gnaw at me. There was a tension in her voice when she spoke to certain people, especially when the calls were long or late at night. Then there were the mysterious work trips. Kelsey had never traveled much for work before, but suddenly she was leaving early in the mornings and coming back late at night, sometimes with no notice, sometimes for days at a time. She had always kept a shared calendar on the fridge, a little thing we did for planning weekends or trips. But those trips weren't marked, and when I asked her about it, her responses were always vague. Meetings, client needs, nothing specific. I tried to brush it off, maybe she was just getting more involved in her job, which she had been talking about a lot recently. Maybe I was just overthinking things. But then she started wearing new clothes, gym clothes specifically. Bright, trendy workout gear that I'd never seen before. Kelsey had never been much of a gym goer, at least not regularly, but now it seemed like she was obsessed. She'd slip into those clothes at the oddest hours, right before she would leave for one of these work trips. I thought maybe she had joined a new fitness class, but when I asked her, she waved it off. Just trying to feel better about myself, she said, flashing a tight smile. She didn't even tell me the name of the gym or class, something I would normally have asked her about. It wasn't just the new clothes or the trips. It was the way she began acting around me too. The light touches, the little moments where she'd laugh at my jokes with that same polite smile, but without any real joy in her eyes. She seemed distracted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was pulling away, slowly, piece by piece. The last straw, though, was the change in her routine. Kelsey had always been a creature of habit. Every Sunday, without fail, we'd sit down together to plan the week, but this time she canceled. "I have a lot to do," she said, avoiding my gaze as she scrolled through her phone. I tried to shrug it off, but deep down, I knew it wasn't just about the week ahead. It was something else. As the days passed, I began to watch her more closely, paying attention to every little inconsistency. The way her eyes darted away when she spoke about work. The way she seemed to jump at the sound of the phone ringing, as though afraid I would pick it up. Something was happening, something that felt like a slow burn, and I couldn't keep pretending I didn't see it. But what could I do? Confronting her directly seemed too soon, too risky. I had to be sure. I didn't expect to find anything. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that I was reading too much into everything. But when Kelsey left her phone on the kitchen counter one evening, I couldn't ignore the temptation to look. She'd stepped out for a quick grocery run, something about picking up fresh herbs for dinner, and I had a few minutes to kill. I hadn't meant to snoop. It wasn't in my nature. But when I picked up her phone to check the time, I saw a message notification pop up, flashing on the screen. Tyler W. My heart skipped a beat. I had seen that name before. The initials on the coffee cup. The one with the lipstick stain. I couldn't help it. I opened the message. It was brief. A simple, "Hey, you free tomorrow night?" followed by a string of emojis. Something about it made my stomach churn, but it wasn't just the message. It was the familiarity of the tone, the casualness of it. It was personal, intimate even. I stared at the message for a long time, my mind spinning. Tyler W? It felt like everything was starting to click into place. The phone calls that ended abruptly, the new habits, the odd work trips. I had been brushing it off, but now it felt different. This wasn't just a coincidence, it wasn't just a friend. I knew that much. I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. I told myself I needed more evidence. One message wasn't enough to accuse her of anything, but the realization hit me like a cold wave. My wife was hiding something, maybe something huge. I quickly locked the phone and slid it back into place. As I did, the faintest wave of guilt washed over me. What if I was wrong? What if I was just imagining things? But the nagging thought wouldn't go away. Kelsey would be back soon, and I had to figure out what to do next. For now, I decided I'd keep my suspicions to myself. I had to be sure. But how? How could I get the proof I needed? The thought of snooping more, of digging deeper, didn't sit well with me. But what choice did I have? I couldn't just let this sit and do nothing. I had to know the truth, the whole truth. And if it meant gathering evidence, then that's what I would do. For the rest of the night, I couldn't focus. I could hear her moving around the house, preparing dinner, humming softly to herself. But every time I glanced at her, my mind couldn't help but replay that message over and over. Tyler W. That name felt like a weight on my chest. I knew then that I couldn't trust her anymore. At least, not until I figured out exactly what was going on. The next few days felt like a blur. I was living in a fog of uncertainty, each moment with her now tinged with doubt. I still tried to act like everything was fine, like I hadn't seen that message, like I hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary, but inside, I was torn apart. I didn't want to confront her yet. I couldn't, at least not until I had more. But the distance between us grew wider, and with it, my unease deepened. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to stop until I got them. Kelsey's errand ran later than usual. She told me she'd be back by 6, but it was 7:30 when she finally walked in, her usual cheerful self. Though I could tell she was a little flustered. She apologized, saying she had to run an unexpected errand for work. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to. Something about the way she was acting, the way she kept looking at her phone like she was waiting for it to ring, like she was counting the minutes, told me everything I needed to know. I had to act quickly. She was starting to sense the tension between us. I could feel it in her every movement. She was trying too hard to be normal, too quick to fill the silence with small talk about dinner plans, about the weather, about anything but what was really on my mind. But it wasn't enough to hide the cracks. When she left for another errand the next morning, I saw my chance. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to turn into someone I wasn't. But I had to know. The truth had to be out there, in the open, before I confronted her. I grabbed a small, discreet voice recorder from the drawer where I kept random gadgets. It wasn't hard to set it up. I'd done it a few times before for work, using a recorder to capture quick notes or ideas for business meetings. But this time, it wasn't for a presentation or an idea. It was for something else entirely, something that had been tearing me apart. I placed it in the corner of the bedroom, wedged between the wall and a picture frame that sat on the nightstand. It was barely noticeable, but it would do its job. I knew Kelsey would be back soon, and I couldn't risk getting caught in the act. Once the recorder was in place, I sat back on the couch, waiting. The house was eerily quiet. It always felt that way when Kelsey wasn't around. I could hear the hum of the fridge, the soft tick of the clock on the wall, but everything else felt like a distant noise. Every second dragged on. I kept glancing at the door, feeling my heart race with every minute that passed. Was she really gone, or was she just hiding something? Then I heard the sound of the front door opening. She was back. I quickly grabbed a book and pretended to be absorbed in it. I couldn't let on that I knew anything. I had to keep playing it cool. She entered the room, a little out of breath. "Hey, sorry that took longer than expected," she said, almost apologetically, throwing her purse on the kitchen counter. "Don't worry about it," I replied, not looking up from the book. "You good?" "Yeah," she said quickly. "Just a few things to wrap up before the week's over." I nodded. It sounded so rehearsed, so carefully crafted. The words didn't match the tone of her voice, and I knew she wasn't being entirely honest. I had no idea how long I had before she'd call someone, but I had to wait. I couldn't rush this. And so, I sat there, listening to every little sound around me, her footsteps in the kitchen, the clinking of plates as she started dinner. But all I could think about was the recorder, and the moment I would hear the truth. It didn't take long before Kelsey grabbed her phone from her bag. She stepped out onto the porch to make a call, presumably to Tyler, though I couldn't be sure. It wasn't like I was keeping track of every call she made, but the moment she stepped out, I could feel the knot in my stomach tighten. I had no idea what I would hear, but I had to know. I barely took a breath as I silently walked toward the bedroom. The recorder was small, but it could pick up everything. I hit the button, and, for the first time in days, I felt a little relief. This was it. I quietly moved back to the living room, sitting on the couch and pretending to read my book again. But I wasn't really reading, not anymore. I was waiting. Her voice, quiet at first, soon came through. "Hey, it's me. Everything's going according to plan. I'll see you soon, but don't text me for a while. Let's keep this between us." My heart sank. It was exactly what I had feared. Her voice carried a careful, rehearsed edge, like she'd practiced this conversation 1,000 times before. It was so normal, so casual, like it was no big deal. Then Tyler spoke. His voice was too familiar, too comfortable. "Can't wait. I'll get the hotel room booked for next week, same time as last time. Are you sure she won't suspect anything?" Kelsey laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was tight, forced. "She's too distracted. She won't even know I'm gone. We'll be fine." I felt the cold wash over me, the weight of their plans, the lies, all of it hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just an affair, it was a secret life, carefully crafted, neatly wrapped in lies. She wasn't just hiding something. She was hiding everything. I stayed still, listening to every word, every second of the conversation, my heart heavy with the realization that this wasn't something I could ignore anymore. Kelsey wasn't the woman I thought she was, and I wasn't the fool she thought I was. The last few days felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for the inevitable. I had the proof I needed, but something kept me from confronting Kelsey. Maybe it was the hope that I could somehow be wrong, that this was all a misunderstanding. But I wasn't wrong, and deep down, I knew that if I didn't confront her soon, I might lose my mind. The recordings were a knife in my gut. cutting deeper with each listen. I'd heard her carefully plotted lies, heard Tyler's voice speaking to her like it was normal, like it was nothing. She was living a life I wasn't a part of, and I had been blind to it for far too long. The calmness in her voice, the way she casually talked about meeting him, about lying to me. It was all so chilling. I had everything. The recordings, the phone records, even the location data from the time she said she was on a business trip but was actually somewhere else entirely. Each piece of evidence painted a clearer picture of the betrayal, and it was a picture I never wanted to see. But now I knew the truth. The truth that Kelsey wasn't just hiding a small part of herself. She was leading a double life, one where I had no place. The fantasy I'd been living in, this happy marriage, this life we'd built together, was a lie, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I sat at the kitchen table, the weight of everything pressing down on me. Kelsey was in the other room, packing up for another one of her mysterious work trips. She hadn't even noticed the shift in the air, the change in my behavior. But I was different now. I wasn't the same man who blindly trusted her. I had the evidence, and I wasn't going to be blindsided again. She came into the room, humming, looking carefree, as if nothing had changed. "Everything's ready for my trip," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "I'll be back in a couple of days. We'll have dinner when I get back, yeah?" I couldn't stop the smile that stretched across my face, though it felt more like a mask than anything genuine. "Of course," I said, my voice controlled, methodical. "I'll be right here." She didn't notice the shift in my tone. She didn't sense the tension in the room, the way I was holding everything together by the thinnest thread. But I knew it wouldn't last. The truth was out, and she would have to face it. I wasn't going to confront her yet, not directly. I was going to let her unravel, slowly. I stood up and kissed her cheek as she made her way to the door, her suitcase in tow. She paused, turning to face me with a curious look. "You okay?" I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Yeah, I'm fine." She smiled and waved as she left. As soon as the door clicked shut behind her, I pulled out my phone and opened the recordings again. There was no rush. There was no need to confront her now. I would wait for the right moment, let her walk right into her own trap. And when she did, I'd be ready. The silence in the house felt different now. It wasn't empty. It was filled with the truth. The weight of it hung in the air, thick and heavy. I just had to wait. And I could. The house felt unnervingly normal in the days that followed. Kelsey was the same, her routine, her smile, her touch. Nothing had changed, at least not on the surface. But I knew the truth now. I couldn't shake the realization that she was living a life I wasn't a part of, a life that had been carefully hidden from me. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. There were too many pieces left unaccounted for, too many things I still didn't know. And even though I was filled with a quiet rage, I knew I had to play this carefully. I had to wait for her to slip up. I kept up appearances. I acted like nothing was wrong. The small talk over dinner was the same. Our nightly routines never changed. I wanted to believe I was still in control of myself, but deep down, I was just waiting for her to make the next mistake. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was only one step away from her unraveling. Then, it happened. She left early one Saturday morning for what she called a spontaneous work meeting. Her words were casual, as always, but something in her eyes told me she was lying, and that's when I decided it was time to test her. I had spent the entire week pretending to be oblivious to her behavior, but now it was time for a different approach. I had to see if she truly thought I was blind. So I did something simple, something she wouldn't think twice about. I told her I was going for a quick run, a routine I had followed for years, and one she never questioned. She smiled and waved me off, too eager to get out of the door herself. But I wasn't running. I took a long loop around the block, making sure to circle back to the house a few minutes before she would normally return. Quietly, I slipped through the back door, the one that led directly into the kitchen. My heart pounded in my chest as I crept up the stairs. I needed to be careful. I knew she would likely call Tyler again. She always did when she thought I wasn't around. This time, I would listen in. I set myself up at the top of the stairs, just out of sight. It wasn't the ideal spot, but it would have to do. The sound of her voice filtered up from below. She was talking to him, casual at first, just like I'd heard before. I held my breath, straining to hear each word, the air around me thick with tension. "I miss you too," Kelsey said softly, and my stomach twisted. "Let's meet up on Wednesday. I'll be out of town Tuesday, but we'll have all night. I closed my eyes, trying to control my reaction. I heard Tyler's voice next, though I couldn't make out his exact words, but the next part was clear. I'll get the room, don't worry. We'll be fine. Everything's fine. Just don't let him suspect anything. Her response was almost a whisper, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. He'll never know. He's too focused on his own life. He's too easy to fool. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The air was suddenly suffocating, and I wanted to go downstairs to confront her in that very moment, but I held myself back. This wasn't the time. Not yet. I needed more. I quietly retreated to the back door, slipping back out into the yard before she could return. I needed to keep it together, not just for the confrontation to come, but for my own peace of mind. I had already learned enough. Kelsey had been lying to me for longer than I realized, and now I had the confirmation. She came home soon after, exactly as I expected, breezing through the front door with a cheerful, "Hey, I'm back." I couldn't look at her, not yet. I needed time to process what I had just heard. "Hey," I said, glancing over at her with a forced smile. "How was the meeting?" "Busy," she replied, dropping her purse on the couch. "But I got everything done. Can we have dinner soon? I'm starving." "Sure," I said, my voice flat. "I'll get something started." As I turned toward the kitchen, I couldn't help but feel the weight of everything pressing on me. She had built this lie, this double life, and had kept me in the dark for so long. But now I knew. I had all the evidence I needed, and I wasn't going to let it slide. The first test had been passed. She had no idea I was on to her, but the real test was still to come. I spent the next few days in a state of careful control. Kelsey had no idea that I knew the truth now. I'd managed to keep up the facade, playing the role of the oblivious husband when all I wanted to do was confront her, demand answers. But that wouldn't be smart. Not yet. I had to do this methodically. I had everything I needed now. The recordings, the phone records, the messages. I had evidence of her lies, and I knew I couldn't just throw it all at her in one explosive confrontation. I needed to let her have the space to realize the gravity of it all, let her process it in her own way. I wasn't going to give her a chance to talk her way out of it, not this time. So, I did what I had been planning. I waited for her to leave one morning, as she always did, off to another work trip, though I no longer believed her lies. I grabbed the flash drive I had kept hidden in my drawer, the one with everything on it, the recordings of her with Tyler, their conversations, the proof of her betrayal. I knew she'd find it. I placed it on the kitchen counter next to the coffee machine where she always made her morning brew. I made sure it was in plain sight, somewhere she couldn't miss it. I told myself it was my final act of leaving it in her path, my way of letting her face the consequences without needing to confront her directly. She wouldn't expect it. She thought she had me wrapped around her finger, but she wouldn't get away with this. Hours passed before I heard the sound of the door creaking open. Kelsey's footsteps on the floor, soft at first, but then a sudden halt as she noticed the flash drive on the counter. I didn't look up from the living room, but I could hear her approach. I stayed still, pretending to read a book. I could hear her pick up the flash drive, her fingers brushing the smooth surface, probably wondering what it was. And then there was the sound of her stepping into the bedroom, the quiet click of the laptop turning on. It was all happening so fast now. I didn't need to hear her gasp, or the disbelief in her voice when she listened to the recordings. I didn't need to see her face twist with shock, or the way she would realize how much I knew. I heard her start the first file. The first words, Tyler's voice, so familiar, so casual, cut through the silence like a knife. "I miss you too." Kelsey's breath caught. Her voice followed next, muffled but unmistakable. "We'll be fine. Don't worry about him. I've got everything under control." My stomach churned, but I didn't move. I couldn't let her see that I was waiting for this. I had to let her listen. Let her understand just how much I knew now. A minute passed. Another. The silence between the clicks of the file was deafening. I could hear the hum of her breathing, the rustling of papers, as if she was trying to process everything. Then I heard her mutter to herself, barely a whisper, "Oh my God." And then, a moment later, click. The laptop closed. Kelsey was in shock, I could tell. The world she had been building, the lies, all of it was falling apart right in front of her. I stayed where I was, my hands tightly gripping the edges of the chair. My chest felt tight, but I didn't feel the anger I expected. I didn't feel the urge to confront her, to yell at her, to demand she explain herself. No, I didn't need that. The truth was in the flash drive. It was all there. She couldn't escape it, not this time. And then I heard her footsteps, slow and heavy, like she was dragging the weight of her own guilt behind her. She passed by the living room, but I didn't look up. She stopped in the doorway. "I can explain," she said, her voice trembling. I kept my eyes on the page of the book, my hands steady on the edges of the pages. "You don't need to," I replied calmly, my voice soft but firm. "You've already said everything." She didn't answer. She just stood there, her presence lingering, like she was hoping I'd look up at her, or that maybe she could explain herself, make it seem like it wasn't as bad as it seemed. But I didn't give her the satisfaction. I didn't need her excuses. I stood up slowly, not acknowledging her presence. I walked past her and toward the front door. "I'll be out of your way in a bit," I said without looking back. I grabbed my coat, my car keys, and headed for the door. Kelsey didn't follow me. She didn't try to stop me. As I stepped outside, I felt a strange kind of peace settle over me. The truth had finally come out. And now I could move forward. Not with her, but with myself. The days following Kelsey's discovery of the flash drive were tense. There was no dramatic confrontation, no loud outbursts or tear-filled pleas. She had taken the evidence in stride, though I could see it in the way her hands shook when she picked up the flash drive. She didn't confront me directly, but I could feel the weight of her guilt hanging heavily between us. She knew I knew. But despite everything, Kelsey remained calm, at least on the surface. She was still trying to keep up appearances, still acting like everything was fine. I wasn't sure if she thought she could somehow talk her way out of it, or if she was simply waiting for me to make the first move. What she didn't know was that I had already moved. Kelsey had been working from home for the past few days, a quiet desperation in her attempts to avoid me. It wasn't hard to see through her. Her every move screamed guilt. She would answer the phone too quickly or leave the room at odd times. I could feel her watching me, wondering when I would snap, when I would finally confront her. But I had other plans. It was time to play this out on my terms. A few days after she found the flash drive, I received an email from her HR department. The subject was complaint regarding professional conduct. I opened it slowly, almost expecting it, but still feeling the sting as I read her accusations. Kelsey was claiming that I had been inappropriate, that I'd been harassing her, making her feel uncomfortable in the workplace, and even threatening her career. I blinked, the cold fury rising in me. She was trying to turn the tables, to paint me as the villain when she was the one who had betrayed me. But I wasn't about to let that happen. I had prepared for this. I had been methodical, careful, and quiet. I had kept detailed records of everything, every conversation, every message, and every lie she told. I had screenshots of her communications with Tyler. I had location data. I had it all. It was irrefutable. The facts were on my side, and Kelsey had no idea what she was walking into. I didn't immediately respond to her complaint. Instead, I took my time, gathering the evidence I needed to counter her claims. I meticulously compiled everything: emails, phone records, the recordings, and even the data from the voice recorder I had used to gather her conversations. Everything was lined up in neat folders on my computer. When I sent my response, I attached it all. I wasn't going to leave any room for doubt. I sat back in my chair and clicked send. The next day, I got a call from her HR representative. The tone of his voice was formal, but there was a hint of discomfort in it. "Mr. Lawrence, we've received your response and reviewed the materials you provided. I have to say the information is unexpected." I kept my voice steady, calm. "I'm sure it is. Let me be clear, Mr. Lawrence. Your claims, they're serious. I think we may need to involve legal counsel at this point." I nodded. "That's fine. I have nothing to hide." The HR representative hesitated, his voice softer now. I want to make sure we're being fair to both sides here. I need you to understand we have to handle this with the utmost sensitivity. You know how serious these kinds of accusations are?" I barely controlled my anger. "I'm not the one making accusations. I'm simply defending myself. If you need to involve legal counsel, feel free. I've got everything in order." "Understood, Mr. Lawrence. We'll proceed with the next steps." As the call ended, I sat there for a moment, staring at the phone. I had done everything I could to ensure the truth came to light. I wasn't going to let her turn this into a smear campaign against me. The truth was there, clear and undeniable, and now it was her turn to face it. It was a week after Kelsey had found the flash drive, and the silence between us was starting to feel suffocating. She hadn't said a word about the contents of the recordings, but I could feel the weight of her guilt hanging in the air, the tension thick enough to cut. She was walking around on eggshells, pretending like everything was fine, but I knew it wasn't. And I knew she was hoping I would break the silence first, but I didn't. I kept my distance, staying calm, allowing her to stew in her own thoughts. She knew I knew. She had to know that there was no more hiding, no more running from the truth. I had hoped at first that she would come to me, confess and apologize. But instead, she did what I had feared the most. She escalated the situation. It started with an email. The subject line was bold. Immediate action required, legal matter. I opened it slowly, already bracing myself for the worst. In the email, Kelsey accused me of harassment, of threatening her job, her career, and her reputation. She claimed I had used my position and power to intimidate her, to manipulate her into silence. The email was a mess of half-truths and twisted facts, written with such venom that it was clear she had planned this attack meticulously. Her words were sharp, but there was a cold, calculating tone beneath them that made my skin crawl. She was attempting to make me the villain in this story, to shift the blame onto me, to paint herself as the victim in a situation she had orchestrated. She even threatened to take legal action against me, something I knew wasn't just empty words. I took a deep breath and leaned back in my chair. The anger was still there, of course, but it wasn't the rush of rage I had expected. It was controlled, measured. This was the final move in her game, and she had underestimated me. I didn't respond right away. There was no need. She had given me all the ammunition I needed to destroy her false narrative. My evidence was clear, irrefutable. I had everything I needed to counter her claims, to expose her for what she truly was. She thought she could scare me, manipulate me into silence, but I wasn't going to back down. The next day I prepared my response, calm, calculated, and professional. I didn't let my emotions show, not even for a second. I attached the documents, the recordings, the screenshots, the location data. Everything was there, everything she had done. I outlined the timeline of her lies, her deceit, and her manipulation, and I sent it directly to HR and the legal team. The email I sent back was short. I have reviewed your complaint. Attached are the materials that I believe will clarify the situation. I look forward to resolving this matter swiftly and without further escalation. I clicked send, and for the first time in days, I felt the weight lifting off my chest. Kelsey had made her move, but I was the one in control now. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me any longer. She thought she could intimidate me with threats and false accusations, but I had built my case step by step until there was no room left for her lies to breathe. I wasn't angry. I was calm. I was detached, and I could feel the shift in the air, the quiet realization settling in. Kelsey's tactics had failed. She could fight back, escalate things further. But it didn't matter anymore. She couldn't change the facts. The war of attrition had begun, and I had already won. The papers were in my hands now. The divorce papers. I hadn't expected to feel anything as I signed them. No anger, no bitterness. I thought I would be filled with rage, or perhaps relief, but there was nothing. Just a deep, almost hollow calm. I had spent so much time looking for answers, gathering the pieces of Kelsey's lies, that I hadn't stopped to think about how I would feel once it was over. The truth was out. She had betrayed me in the worst way imaginable, but it wasn't the betrayal that hurt anymore. It was the realization that I had given so much of myself to a person who never truly saw me, never truly valued me for who I was. As I stared at the divorce papers in front of me, I thought about how much had changed. How much I had changed. The man who had entered this marriage, naive, hopeful, trusting, wasn't the same man who was walking out of it. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I had come to a quiet understanding with myself. I was done, and I knew, deep down, that this was the right choice. Kelsey had been at work all day, and when she walked through the door that evening, she looked the same as she always did. Casual, carefree, her eyes still trying to hold on to that facade of normalcy. She glanced at me, but there was nothing in her face that suggested she had any idea what was coming. I was quiet, methodical, as I always was in the last few days. The house felt emptier somehow, as if everything in it had lost its meaning. Her presence, which used to feel like home, now felt like a foreign object I couldn't bear to look at for too long. I stayed silent, waiting for her to say something first. But she didn't. Her movements were rushed, like she was trying to act as if nothing had changed. It didn't matter. I knew what I had to do. I handed her the envelope. "Is this—" she started, glancing at the papers, then back at me, confusion written all over her face. I nodded, my voice calm. "It's over." Her eyes widened, and she looked at me like she hadn't understood the gravity of what I was saying. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She just stared at the papers. I could tell she was trying to hold on to something, some kind of excuse, some way to explain herself away, but she had nothing left to say. There was nothing she could say. I watched as the reality of it hit her, her face draining of color. For the first time, I saw her truly vulnerable, just a woman who had lost everything, who had nowhere to hide. I don't understand," she stammered, still holding the papers in her hands like they were burning her. "You can't just—" "I can," I said, interrupting her. "It's done. I'm done." Her voice cracked, but she didn't try to stop me. She just stood there, looking at the divorce papers as if they were a final verdict on everything she had done. And maybe they were. I didn't wait for her to beg or plead or offer some last-minute excuse. I knew her too well for that. Instead, I quietly started gathering my things. I didn't rush, didn't hurry. It was almost as if I was savoring the silence, the peace, the finality of it all. As I packed a bag with my clothes, Kelsey stood in the doorway, frozen. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. The apartment felt cold, even though the air conditioning wasn't on. When I was done, I moved slowly, almost methodically. There was no shouting, no emotional chaos like I had expected. No final confrontation, no dramatic scene. I didn't need that. I grabbed my keys, turned to her one last time, and said, "Goodbye, Kelsey." Her eyes welled up with tears, but she didn't speak. She simply nodded, too ashamed to say anything else. I left without looking back. The days that followed were oddly peaceful. I moved my things out slowly, carefully. Every item I took was another step away from the life I had lived with her. It wasn't about vengeance or anger. It was about reclaiming my life, piece by piece. In the silence of my new apartment, I realized just how much I had changed. I had no room for self-pity anymore, no space left for regret. The man I was now didn't need to cling to the past, didn't need to fix the broken pieces. He had learned the hard way, but he had learned, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. As I sat down on the couch in my new place, a sense of calm washed over me. I thought about everything that had happened, the lies, the betrayal, the slow unraveling of a marriage I had thought was unbreakable. But in the end, I knew I had done the right thing. I had taken control of my life. I had stopped pretending to be someone I wasn't for someone who didn't deserve it. The quiet strength it took to walk away was the last piece of me that I needed to find. And as I looked around the empty apartment, I realized something else. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of being alone.